Welcome to Unmasked Fame, where we uncover dark secrets, stories, and conspiracies about the world's most famous celebrities and actors.
You know that moment when you look at someone you've known forever and something just feels off? Like they're wearing a mask of their own face? Well, what if I told you that millions of fans around the world believe this exact thing happened to one of the biggest pop-punk icons of the 2000s? We're talking about secrets, identity theft, and a conspiracy so wild it makes Hollywood thrillers look tame. Avril Lavigne burst onto the music scene in 2002 with her rebellious attitude, necktie fashion, and that unmistakable raspy voice that defined a generation. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Fans started noticing differences, strange inconsistencies, details that didn't add up, and what they discovered would shake the very foundation of everything they thought they knew about their beloved punk princess. This isn't just about a celebrity changing their style or growing up. This is about a theory so explosive that it suggests the real Avril Lavigne disappeared years ago, replaced by a carefully trained imposter who's been living her life ever since. The evidence is everywhere once you know where to look, and the implications are absolutely mind-blowing. I've spent months diving deep into this rabbit hole, analyzing photos, studying interviews, and connecting dots that most people would never think to connect. What I found will make you question everything you thought you knew about fame, the music industry, and how far powerful people will go to protect their investments. By the end of this investigation, you'll never look at Avril Lavigne the same way again. But before we dive into the shocking evidence, let me paint you a picture of just how massive this conspiracy really is. We're not talking about a few internet trolls with too much time on their hands. This theory has captivated millions of people across the globe, spawning countless forums, detailed investigations, and even academic discussions. The supposed replacement has fooled record executives, fooled the media, and fooled most of the world for over 2 decades. The woman we see today claiming to be Avril Lavigne has everything: the fame, the fortune, the loyal fan base. But what if it's all built on the biggest lie in music history? What if the real Avril is somewhere out there, silenced and forgotten, while an imposter lives her dream life? The truth is darker and more complex than you could ever imagine. Born in Belleville, Ontario, in 1984, Avril Ramona Lavigne was destined for greatness from the moment she picked up a guitar. Her parents recognized her talent early, and by the time she was 15, she was already turning heads in the music industry. This small-town girl with big dreams and an even bigger attitude was about to change pop music forever. Her breakthrough came when she was discovered at a bookstore in her hometown. A talent scout heard her singing and knew immediately that this was someone special. Within months, she was in New York, working with some of the biggest names in the business. The machine was in motion, and there was no stopping it. But here's where things get interesting. The Avril Lavigne who signed that first record deal was raw, authentic, and unapologetically herself. She wrote her own songs, chose her own style, and refused to be molded into just another manufactured pop star. She was a rebel in every sense of the word, and that rebellion made her millions of dollars and countless devoted fans. Her debut album, Let Go, exploded onto the charts in 2002. Songs like Complicated and Skater Boy became anthems for an entire generation of misfits and outcasts. She wasn't just singing about teenage angst. She was living it, breathing it, and turning it into pure musical gold. This was the real Avril Lavigne, and she was unstoppable. The early years were a whirlwind of success, but they were also incredibly demanding. The pressure from record labels, the constant touring, the media scrutiny, it was enough to break anyone. Avril was young, talented, and thrust into a spotlight that burned brighter than she could have ever imagined. And according to the theory, this pressure would eventually become too much to bear. Fast forward to 2003, and cracks were already starting to show. Avril was struggling with the demands of fame, reportedly becoming increasingly isolated and difficult to work with. She was homesick, exhausted, and beginning to question whether this was really the life she wanted. Industry insiders whispered about her erratic behavior and growing dissatisfaction with the music business. Then came the moment that believers in this theory point to as the turning point. During a particularly difficult period in 2003, Avril allegedly became so overwhelmed by the pressures of stardom that she began talking about wanting to disappear completely. She wanted out of her contracts, out of the spotlight, and out of the life that had consumed her teenage years. But here's the thing about the music industry. When you're worth millions of dollars to record labels and management companies, they don't just let you walk away. Too much money was at stake. Too many careers depended on the Avril Lavigne brand continuing to generate revenue. If the real Avril wanted out, they would need to find a way to keep the machine running without her. Enter Melissa Vandella, a woman whose name most people have never heard, but who believers claim is now one of the most famous people on the planet. According to the theory, Melissa was carefully selected and trained to become Avril's replacement. She had the right look, the right height, and most importantly, she was willing to live someone else's life for fame and fortune. The transformation allegedly took months of intensive preparation. Voice coaching to match Avril's distinctive raspy tone, studying hours of footage to perfect her mannerisms and stage presence, learning the backstories, the personal details, the relationships that made Avril who she was. Every scar, every tattoo, every quirk had to be memorized and replicated. But even the most careful preparation couldn't account for everything. And this is where the evidence begins to mount. Fans started noticing subtle differences in photos from 2003 onward. The shape of her face seemed different. Her nose appeared altered. Even her hands looked changed. These weren't just the natural effects of aging or makeup. These were fundamental differences in bone structure and physical features. The voice was another telltale sign. While the replacement allegedly trained extensively to match Avril's sound, trained ears could detect differences in tone, pitch, and vocal techniques. Songs recorded after 2003 had a slightly different quality, a subtle shift that most casual listeners wouldn't notice, but that dedicated fans found impossible to ignore. Then there were the behavioral changes. The new Avril seemed more polished, more controlled, less likely to speak her mind or challenge authority. The rebellious streak that had defined her early career appeared to have been carefully managed and contained. She was still marketed as edgy and alternative, but something essential was missing. Friends and family members allegedly noticed changes too, though most have remained silent about their suspicions. The theory suggests that those closest to Avril were either paid to stay quiet or genuinely convinced that the changes were just natural evolution. After all, who would believe such an outrageous claim without concrete proof? The most chilling aspect of this theory is how perfectly it would have worked. If executed correctly, the replacement could continue Avril's career indefinitely, generating profits for decades while the real Avril remained hidden from the world. It would be the ultimate corporate conspiracy, turning a human being into a replaceable asset. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. 2003 was before social media really took off, before every moment of a celebrity's life was documented and analyzed frame by frame. It was easier to control the narrative, easier to manage public perception, and easier to hide the truth from millions of unsuspecting fans. But conspiracies this big always leave traces. Despite the careful planning and execution, evidence began to emerge that something wasn't right. Photographs that showed inconsistencies, interview clips where body language didn't match, concert footage where performance styles seemed different. The clues were there for anyone brave enough to look for them. What makes this theory so compelling isn't just the evidence. It's how it explains so many things that never quite made sense about Avril's career trajectory. The sudden shift in musical style, the changes in her public persona, even the way she seemed to lose touch with her Canadian roots. All of these puzzling developments suddenly make perfect sense if you accept that we're looking at a different person entirely. The question that haunts believers in this theory is simple but terrifying. If this is true, where is the real Avril Lavigne now? Is she living quietly somewhere, bound by legal agreements and non-disclosure contracts? Is she watching from the shadows as someone else lives the life she built? Or is the truth even darker than anyone wants to imagine? The deeper you dig into this mystery, the more disturbing it becomes. Because if the music industry is capable of something this elaborate and deceptive, what else are they hiding? How many other celebrities might not be who they claim to be? The implications stretch far beyond just one pop star and into the very nature of fame, identity, and truth in our modern world. But we're just getting started. The evidence I'm about to show you will shake you to your core and make you question everything you thought you knew about the entertainment industry. The photographic analysis alone will leave you speechless, and when you see the side-by-side comparisons, you'll understand why millions of people around the world believe that Avril Lavigne died in 2003 and was replaced by an imposter who's been fooling us all ever since. The evidence starts with something so subtle that most people would dismiss it as coincidence. But when you line up photographs from 2002 and 2004, the differences become impossible to ignore. I'm talking about bone structure changes that plastic surgery simply cannot explain. The distance between her eyes, the shape of her skull, even the way her ears attach to her head. These are genetic markers that remain constant throughout a person's life, yet they appear completely different in the supposed Avril of today. Let me walk you through what forensic analysts have discovered. Using facial recognition software, experts measured key points on Avril's face from early photos and compared them to images taken just 2 years later. The results were staggering. We're not talking about minor variations that could be explained by camera angles or lighting. These were fundamental structural differences that would require you to literally rebuild someone's skeleton. The nose is perhaps the most obvious change. Early Avril had a slightly wider nose with a distinct bump on the bridge. Post-2003 Avril has a narrower, straighter nose that looks completely different from every angle. Plastic surgery could explain this, but here's the problem. There's no recovery period visible in any photographs. One day she had one nose, the next day she had another. No bruising, no swelling, no gradual healing process that you'd expect from major reconstructive surgery. But it gets stranger. Her teeth alignment changed dramatically. Dental records are used by forensic investigators specifically because they're so unique and difficult to alter. Yet comparison photos show clear differences in tooth positioning, gaps, and even the shape of individual teeth. To achieve this level of change would require extensive orthodontic work over many months. Yet there's no evidence of braces or any dental procedures during this period. The hands tell an even more disturbing story. Hand analysis is one of the most reliable forms of identification because finger length ratios, palm lines, and bone structure are completely unique to each individual. Photos from Avril's early career show hands with specific characteristics: the length ratio between her ring finger and index finger, the pattern of lines on her palms, even small scars and birthmarks. Post-2003 photos show hands that don't match these markers at all. One particularly observant fan created a detailed analysis of Avril's moles and birthmarks. The original Avril had a distinctive mole on her chin and several smaller marks on her arms and hands. These identifying features are completely absent in later photographs, with no evidence of removal procedures. It's as if they simply vanished overnight, replaced by an entirely different pattern of marks and blemishes. The voice analysis reveals equally troubling inconsistencies. Audio engineers have broken down vocal patterns from Avril's early recordings and compared them to her later work. While the replacement clearly trained to sound similar, there are technical differences that trained ears can detect. The original Avril's voice had specific resonance patterns, breathing techniques, and vocal cord characteristics that create a unique acoustic fingerprint. The post-2003 voice shows subtle but measurable differences in these markers. Even more revealing are the live performances. Early concert footage shows Avril with a particular way of moving, specific gestures, and a natural stage presence that seemed effortless. Later performances show someone who appears to be consciously thinking about how to move and act. The spontaneity is gone, replaced by what looks like carefully rehearsed behaviors. It's the difference between someone being themselves and someone playing a character. The language patterns change too. Linguistic experts have noted that Avril's speech patterns, vocabulary choices, and even her accent shifted after 2003. The original Avril had distinct Canadian speech patterns and used specific slang terms that reflected her Ontario upbringing. The replacement speaks in a more generic North American accent and occasionally uses phrases that don't align with Avril's background or generation. Family dynamics provide another troubling piece of evidence. Those close to the situation have noted that Avril's relationship with her family seemed to change dramatically during this period. She became more distant from her parents and siblings, canceling family visits and avoiding traditional gatherings. When she did appear with family members, body language experts noted a visible tension and unfamiliarity that hadn't existed before. Her relationship with longtime friends followed a similar pattern. People who had known Avril since childhood began to distance themselves from her, with many refusing to discuss the changes they witnessed. Several former friends have given cryptic interviews over the years, hinting at something being different about Avril without explicitly stating what they meant. The fear in their voices when discussing this topic is palpable. The timeline of these changes is crucial to understanding the full scope of what allegedly happened. According to the theory, the replacement process wasn't instantaneous. There was a gradual transition period where both the real Avril and her replacement may have been used strategically. Public appearances were carefully managed, with the real Avril handling situations that required specific personal knowledge, while the replacement took over for more generic promotional activities. The most haunting evidence comes from interviews where the replacement was asked about specific childhood memories that only the real Avril would know. Watch closely as she stumbles through answers about her first guitar, her early songwriting process, or stories her family had shared publicly in previous interviews. The hesitation, the vague responses, the way she deflects with humor or changes the subject. It's the behavior of someone who's been briefed but lacks the genuine emotional connection to these memories. Perhaps the most chilling detail is what happened to Avril's original songwriting style. The real Avril wrote deeply personal lyrics that reflected her specific experiences growing up in a small Canadian town. Her early songs contained references that only someone who lived that exact life could authentically create. After 2003, her music became more generic, relying on professional songwriters and losing that raw, autobiographical quality that had made her famous. The replacement theory also explains the dramatic shift in Avril's relationships. Her romantic life became a carefully orchestrated series of high-profile relationships that generated maximum media attention. Gone were the genuine connections with musicians and artists who shared her creative vision. Instead, we saw strategic pairings that served the business interests of multiple parties, relationships that felt manufactured for public consumption rather than born from authentic attraction. Industry insiders who worked with both versions of Avril have provided the most damaging testimony, though always off the record and with strict anonymity. Producers, sound engineers, and backup musicians have described a stark difference in working with Avril before and after 2003. The original was described as intuitive, passionate, and deeply involved in every aspect of the creative process. The replacement is portrayed as professional but detached, following directions rather than leading the artistic vision. The psychological impact on the replacement herself cannot be ignored. Living someone else's life completely would take an enormous toll on anyone's mental health. Some observers point to periods of erratic behavior, public breakdowns, and mysterious disappearances as evidence that even a trained professional struggles with the weight of maintaining such an elaborate deception. The pressure to never break character, never reveal the truth, never live as your authentic self. It's a form of psychological torture that would break most people. What makes this conspiracy particularly insidious is how it exploits our relationship with celebrity culture. We think we know these people because we see them on screens and hear their voices on the radio. But the truth is, we only know the image they present to us. If that image can be so carefully constructed and maintained by a replacement, what does that say about the nature of fame itself? How many of our beloved celebrities are really just actors playing roles they can never escape? The cover-up extends beyond just the replacement herself. Record labels, management companies, publicists, and media outlets would all need to be complicit in maintaining this deception. The financial incentives are obvious. the Avril Lavigne brand is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But the human cost is incalculable. If true, this represents one of the most elaborate and sustained frauds in entertainment history. The real question isn't whether this theory is possible. We've seen how advanced makeup, prosthetics, and training can transform someone into an almost perfect double. The question is whether the entertainment industry would actually orchestrate something this extreme to protect their investment. Given the billions of dollars at stake in the history of exploitation in the music business, many believers argue that such a conspiracy is not just possible, but inevitable. The evidence continues to mount with each passing year. New photographs surface that show additional inconsistencies. Former industry professionals come forward with cryptic statements that hint at knowledge of the truth. Fan communities grow larger and more sophisticated in their analysis, using advanced technology to document every discrepancy they can find. What's perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that this isn't an isolated incident. If the music industry successfully replaced one major star, how many others might have suffered the same fate? The theory has sparked investigations into other celebrities who seem to undergo dramatic changes in appearance, behavior, or artistic output after periods of personal crisis or professional disputes. The implications reach far beyond entertainment into questions about identity, authenticity, and truth in our media-saturated world. If we can't trust that the celebrities we follow are who they claim to be, what else might be fabricated? The Avril Lavigne replacement theory forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how much of what we accept as reality might actually be carefully constructed illusion. For those who knew and loved the original Avril Lavigne, the possibility that she was replaced represents a profound loss. It means mourning someone who may still be alive, but is effectively gone from the world. It means accepting that the person they've been following for decades might be a complete stranger living a stolen life. The believers in this theory aren't asking for much, just acknowledgement of what they see as obvious evidence of deception. They want the truth about what happened to the real Avril Lavigne, wherever she might be now. They want justice for what they believe was an enormous fraud perpetrated on millions of fans around the world. But the truth may never fully emerge. The stakes are too high, the conspiracy too vast, and the evidence too carefully hidden. Those responsible have had decades to perfect their story and eliminate any witnesses who might threaten their secret. The replacement has had years to perfect her performance, to become so comfortable in her stolen identity that even she might sometimes forget who she really is. So we're left with questions that may never be answered. Was Avril Lavigne really replaced by an imposter in 2003? Is the woman performing under her name today living a lie that's consumed her entire adult life? And if this conspiracy is real, how many other beloved celebrities are actually strangers wearing familiar faces? The evidence is compelling, the questions are haunting, and the implications are staggering. Whether you believe the theory or dismiss it as elaborate fantasy, one thing is certain: you'll never look at Avril Lavigne the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the believers wanted all along.